And if we could recreate the atmosphere of that place at that time, when Arish, one of Baba's close Mandali, stood up in front of us and said, "You have kept an appointment with God." If we could do that, we'd have it made. But all of the experiences with Baba and around Baba, or that pertain to Baba, really must be your own. There is no way that we could really explain fully our hearts and our minds in regard to Baba. Everyone's experiences are unique, and yet there's a thread of sameness that runs through them all. So, without any preparation, except 20 years of thinking about these things, reliving and rethinking about things that happened around Baba. And I must say, in all honesty, I think you mentioned Meherji was here several weeks ago. Well, that's a tough act to follow, believe me, because the close Mandali are the ones who are really prepared in thought and in heart to convey something about Baba. I must say that as far as our lives are concerned, Baba's influence has been a very happy one. But I don't want to give the impression that our experiences in regard to Baba are wholly unique. There is no age in Baba lovers. You can be an old square like us, or a beautiful young people as you are. He embraces all of us. We are all divinely precious to him. He's the only man that I have ever seen who did not qualify anyone, as far as I could tell, by his appearance, by his status in the world as a worker, a creator, as a speaker, as a drinker, as a lover, as a swinger. The only thing that concerned Baba was the heart, the sincerity, the honesty, the desire to serve God in whatever capacity or in whatever concept of God you may have. Baba said that it's not necessary to change your religion. He said it's only necessary to live that which you were born to, honestly, sincerely. But if you find this can't be done, then you must leave it, because hypocrisy is the one sin that God does not forgive. There are those who claim to be Baba lovers, and no one but Baba knows whether that claim is valid or not. And I would like to tell you a short story about three young men that we've nicknamed the three wise fools, who we met at Guru Prasad at Darshan. The morning the Darshan began, we met these three young men standing out in the driveway. Three typical young Americans, traveled halfway around the world, received God's blessing, and about 10 minutes until time to put the sandals on the stairs and go in to receive Baba's darshan. And we didn't know really what had happened at this point. We found out the full story about 2 years later at Myrtle Beach. It was almost time to go in, and we were wondering why they hadn't moved toward the entrance. And Mani, Baba's lovely sister, came round the corner of the building, embraced Peggy, embraced me, and then embraced these three boys. Then we went in for darshan. Now, later at Myrtle Beach, one of these boys told the story. He said, "Do you know what really happened that day, why we didn't go in early with the rest?" We said, "No, of course not. What happened?" he said, we didn't think that we were good enough to go in with the other people. I've never been able to decide honestly whether that was a cop-out or an ego trip or just what it was. But it was just one of the many ways that we try to avoid this direct eye-to-eye confrontation with God. We want it all of our lives, we seek it all of our lives, we run away from it all of our lives, and while we're running, we're looking back over our shoulder to see he's coming. The point of that story being that there is no way that you can evaluate anyone's spiritual worth. Be thankful that that's not been given to you, that responsibility. So begin, if you must begin somewhere, by not trying to evaluate anyone's status with God. Most of all your own. Because you'll do one or two things. You'll either sell yourself short or you'll oversell. You'll never hit it right. The perfect masters, Baba, a few of those, know your worth, and that's all that's necessary. So I just wanted to mention that story of those three young men who almost deprived themselves of the greatest blessing they could have ever had, possibly have delayed it for who knows how long, just because they thought they were bad guys. So don't make that mistake. Baba loves you all. Totally. It's our responsibility to find a way to love and serve him. Do you want to ask us questions? Or how do you want to do this?
What was the first year that you met Baba? What year was that?
You mean that we had a physical meeting with Baba?
Yeah.
Oh, in 1952. We've just really returned from Myrtle Beach, where we met him in 1952 in May the 17th, 1952. We were told by Mr. Deuce that Baba's status, and we didn't question her judgment in the matter. We only questioned the fact, well, how could this happen to us? You know, makes you think. But we very innocently and blindly and hopefully made the trip 450 miles, I think it is, to Myrtle Beach to meet the avatar. We were told then what an avatar is and so forth. And I'll turn it over to Peggy, who'll give you an idea, because she was the first one of the two of us to go into the barn to meet Baba. And I have to mention that if it weren't for Peggy, perhaps Baba would have found some other way to get to me, but he found the most pleasant, happy way he possibly could have, and that is through my wife.
Well, I think I'll go back a little further than Andy did, to 1945. And that's when I first met Marcia Deuce. And I knew her for 2 years before she started saying anything about the path and the avatar. And I thought that was rather odd later on, but she said I wasn't quite ready. So I had a book I was reading, and it was on religious ideas, and she took it away from me and said, "Put that down, Peggy." She said, "I'll give you something to read, worthwhile." So that was my introduction to the path, and it was a wonderful one. So from then on, Mershta had a class, and of course it was during the war, and things was very upsetting, but we had a wonderful class there. And, I guess about 3 years later, Mr. Deuce was transferred back to New York, and she said one day, "Well, we're going to leave you for a while." And I said, "How long are you going to be gone, Mershta?" And she said, I don't know, maybe a couple of years, maybe we'll be back shortly." And I said, "What's going to happen to the class?" She says, "You'll take care of it." I said, "Mershta, I couldn't even think of taking care of it." because there was a lot of students in that class who knew about the Avatar and about Mercer Martin and all years before I had run across it. She says, "You have a big recreation room, and that's where the class is going to be. You know, when she's finished, she'll always do this to you." I said, "All right." I said, "But I can't do it." And she said, which I didn't realize then, that's one word you never say to Mercer Deuce. Because if she says, "Do it," you do it. You're wise. So I said, "Well, how can I answer all these questions?" She said, "Oh, Peggy Baba will help you." And I'm here to tell you that that was the truth. Because I carried that class on for about 9 or 10 months. And we still had all of them. Nobody really to come. They all came. Mercer returned to Washington, and we fortunately had her for quite a few years then. But we did not expect ever to meet the Avatar. That was a wild dream, but we were all anxious to live a better life, and we had found a path that was wonderful to go on. So in the meantime, Andy comes back from overseas, and he picked up some of the books, and he was reading them. And of course, he didn't disagree with them, but he wasn't quite sure that that was so. And I said, "Mercer, I'm going to drop him out of the window yet. I don't know why I argue with him." So I tell him, "If you don't want it, fine, that's all right with me." So she, in her unconcerned way, said, "Bring him over to me." So I took Andy over one Sunday. So I thought, this is either going to be, we're going to be good friends, or we're going to split right here. So he'll tell you what he said, his part of the story.
Well, I wasn't prepared to argue with anybody when I went over to meet Mercer Deuce, but I thought if Peggy wanted me to go over, fine. We enjoyed everything we did together. We weren't married yet. We still enjoy everything we do together. We went over to see Mercer, and I remember sitting down in the bright sunshine, little patio she had there in the sunshine, and she looked at me with that expression all of you know, and she said, "Well, Andrew, what is it you want?" And I've told this story several times this week, and those of you who are tired of it, forgive me. But I had a feeling that I'd best be extremely careful about what I said I wanted. You know the old line, "Be careful what you want, for you'll get it." So I thought I'd be cagey, which I've never been able to do with Mercer. And I said, "I want happiness." And that was the truth. And I think I can say that for all of us. My answer certainly wasn't original or unique in any sense, but I thought that covered any situation that she might be able to think of that would be to my benefit, you see. I was leaving an open-ended proposition. So that's exactly what happened, as a matter of fact. I have known as much happiness as I can contain, and as much as more than I ever dared ask for. Well, I guess the next step is when we traveled down the long road to Myrtle Beach. And I say long road because in those days it wasn't a 3 or 4 lane highway. We had to stop overnight on the way. So on that 17th of May, we sat outside the barn. We were all dressed, I suppose we felt this was the proper way to dress to meet him. Neckties, jackets. Francis Brabazon was there that day, met Baba that day. And the screen door opened after a while, and they called Peggy's name. And I'll have to hand it over to her because I don't know what happened except for what she's told me when she first met Baba. And then I'll try to explain my feelings at that point, because it all hinges on this meeting, really.
Well, first I would like all of you to just think for a moment. If someone invited you in to see and meet God, how would you feel? You studied and you'd gone all that did all the traveling to get there, but this was just how were you going to get up those 3 little steps? They looked like a mountain to me. So I went in, and Baba was sitting over to my left, and Adi and Eric were sitting there, and Mershta. Well, I don't remember the distance from the door to the center of the barn where they were sitting, but I made it. And I afterward asked Mershta one thing, did I ever close my mouth? She said, what do you mean? I said, well, the minute I looked at Baba, everything blanked out, and I know my mouth opened. And I could feel it. So then when we went over, Baba embraced me. What happened between then and the time I reached his side, I don't know. Took me in his arms. And a while before that, I had said to my husband one evening, I said, you know, if Baba would only tell me that I had helped one soul to get on the path to him, I would be perfectly satisfied, and it would be wonderful. Now, I had never repeated this until about a year ago, and I was told I ought to have told it, and we kept it together. Mershta knew about it. It seemed to be a little egotistical, and after you're following Bob as long as I have, you've already had your doses of being egotistical, and you don't want any more of them. So when I stood up in front of him, Eric said, Baba says, you have brought him many souls. Well, if everything passed out, then I wouldn't have minded a bit, but I just started crying, which we all do. And then he embraced me, and I asked me to step aside, because he wanted me to wait, I guess, till Andy came in, and then Andy got the signal to come in. And I think I better turn you over to them.
Well, I opened the screen door and looked. I guess Baba was about as far as from where I am now to that large pillar over in the corner when I walked into the room. And I saw him immediately, and I didn't see any other person. I just saw Baba sitting there. And I know I ran to him. And when I tell this little episode, I always explain that when I was a very small boy, maybe 5 or 6, I got totally lost in my hometown in Pennsylvania. And I was crying, and I was worried that it would get dark and I wouldn't make it home, I guess, in time for dinner. And I saw this large lawn in front of a church, and I recognized it from going past there on the streetcars to the park in the summertime, and I knew which way to go to get home. And that was a feeling that I felt, that tremendous relief that I wasn't lost anymore, that I knew I'd find my way home. And that's the nearest thing I can come to explaining how I felt when I first looked at Baba. I know I ran to him, and I asked Peggy last week, 20 years, and I just asked the question. I don't know what I did. I know I embraced him immediately, and he embraced me. And I said, Peggy, did I stand up, lean over and embrace him? Did I sit on his lap? I don't know. I still don't know. But when I embraced him, I immediately started to tear very heavily. I did this every time I was close to Baba, that is, that close to Baba. I've never been able to help that. And when I feel his presence, when I really feel his presence, I usually cry a little less, but a little bit. And Baba gestured, and Adi or Arish, whichever one of the Mandali was, I think it was Adi, said, Baba loves him very much. And I thought I'd been crying up to that point, that really turned it on. And I just shook my head, and then he gestured again and said, he loves Baba very much. And that wrapped it up. I don't care how many books or discourses or proofs or arguments or questions and answers or meetings or any of the rest of it. That did it. That did it. I was in his bag, that was no lie. That doesn't mean that I obeyed him then or after for quite some time. That doesn't mean I was any better than I had been before. It only made me conscious of the fact that we had a very deep relationship. It's going to be a long, long time before I feel I'm really worthy of that love, but there I go. You see, I told you earlier not to try to evaluate these things. So I'll leave that to his judgment and thank him for his grace. But since that time, there has never been any question in our minds of Baba's divinity. There couldn't possibly be. And yet we have no more idea of what God is than just no idea at all. But when you met Baba and when you looked into his eyes and when you studied him and watched him, you just knew that he could never deceive you. He could never lie to you about anything. So on the basis of that and other things, we say without any reservation to anyone that God is Baba, Baba is God in human form, the avatar of the age. Baba says, I am whatever you take me to be. Meaning that it isn't necessary for everyone in this world to repeat his name, Baba, but whatever concept of God you have, you must do this honestly, sincerely and honestly. Baba says, if you don't believe that I am God, say so. But be honest about it. Don't pretend that you're something.
Well, when Baba would have the discourses down at the barn, and they'd last generally about 2 hours, and we would be so interested in what he has to say, and the way he explained it to us, we really thought we knew it. There was no questions to be asked. And then after he closed the session, he would say, questions? Anyone have questions? And just like now, no one had a question. It's either we didn't know what we wanted to ask, or we were so sure we understood it. But when we get out of the barn, we didn't know 2/3 of the discourses. So we're used to this quiet session after the speech.
You understand now when we say Baba said something that he gestured at something.
It was through interpreter.
And then Baba would say, well, and if you understand it, explain it to Baba. He doesn't understand it. He had the most delightful sense of humor that you could ever imagine. And when he enjoyed an incident, when someone, like when they'd have a play or dances or something for his amusement, you never saw anybody look so thoroughly amused as he did. He would, if it was something that was funny to him, you could see his shoulders shake. He would just chuckle inside, you know. And when you see him enjoy something, you didn't even have to see what it was. You just had to watch him and you enjoyed it the same way, you know. And then I remember one time down by the dining room, we were all about as far as that front row is from us, you know, crowded around. We just followed him around like little puppy dogs all day. And one of the Mandali said, Baba wants you all to be completely silent now. Not a sound, not a movement, and look into Baba's eyes. And Baba just looked in our direction, and no one could ever, after that I've ever talked to that was there, could ever describe what they felt during that time that we looked in Baba's eyes. But it was one of the most, well, there's never been I don't think that we ever had such a sensation in our lives before or since. Now, what he did at that time, we don't know. We never knew what he was doing in his inner work. We loved Baba as a man. We loved Baba as a person, as you are. I mean, in the flesh. He was so beautiful. Truly. He was beautiful in a way that transcends ordinary beauty that you've ever seen. When he smiled, it just made you happy throughout. You just felt wonderful just to see him smile. When he looked, as he would sometimes, he would just seem to leave us. I mean, now don't get the idea I'm talking about anything weird. But he would be sitting there and you would just get the feeling that he's, you know, there's no contact there, that you can see him sitting there, but he's not there. And he was, at that time, usually doing his universal work on the higher planes of consciousness. We'd see his fingers move, and then sometimes he'd just do like this or something and sit back, and then you'd say, well, here he is, back again. But there was nothing ever, the weird's the only word that comes to my mind. That's not a very good one. Baba did everything that we could see in a perfectly natural, beautiful way. You know, I always said if Baba had been a phony, he would have done all kinds of theatrical things. He had us right in the palm of his hand. He had a captive audience that he could have done anything with, because we loved him totally. When you love somebody, you'd do anything for them. But he never did such things. His love was so beautiful and so satisfying and so great that he didn't have to do anything. No one would have ever asked Baba to do a miracle. He was the miracle. If I could give you a sense of what this was like, I would certainly do so. I also might say right here that I don't want any of you, and Peggy doesn't want any of you, to get the idea that we're giving you a whole sketch, the whole thing, you know, of what Baba was like. We could never begin to. When somebody tells you, as I did, about looking into his eyes or seeing that beautiful smile, pay no attention to it. It was so much greater than that that's not even a beginning of a description. When we mention his love for you, there's love is just a poor word, you know. There's nothing can describe it. There's nothing can begin to describe it. And you are divinely precious to him. Don't get the idea that because we met Baba physically, that we're any closer or better or anything else to him than you are. I thank him for never giving us that hang-up, because that wouldn't be true. We often thought it was because we needed that contact, that personal contact with him. But perhaps we had been so accustomed to our set ways and ideas of thinking and doing things that we just had to be shocked into loving him that way. And I'm not pretending to explain how he works. He touches your heart. You come to him when you have the courage to try. He always holds that door open for you. And when you have the courage to really love, you'll find a love that you can't imagine. And he'll give you that courage. He's promised it. You've never known what a real heart experience is until you come to him. And then you go into the honeymoon period, as we did, where we were floating around in the air for a couple months or years, you know, just delirious practically. And then the lumps start to come. It's a lot like a marriage. I guess you'd say it is a marriage. And you start to get some conflicts, and you start to rationalize, and you start to try to figure out ways maybe that Baba didn't really mean that. And then you read the discourses, and you come to that part about the ego and determination, you know. And you say, if John could read that chapter, you know, just that part, you know, that's really for him. That's just the way he is. You know, then you read another part where he talks about selfishness or something, and you say, oh man, if I could only get that across to Henrietta or somebody. That's how the ego works. That's how, fools you. Every word in those discourses was written for me and you and Peggy and all of us. Everything in them, believe me, there's not a way out. Every single solitary thing in those discourses is about you. It's about the conference of the birds. You know that story? Well, you're every one of the birds. You read that and you think of people that you know, never yourself. Oh, except when you come to that big bird, But that's one of the things that's so deceptive about reading these things. We always relate them to something or somebody else. And, they belong to the somebody else too. But try to remember the next time you study these things that they apply to you. And you'll begin to get a lot from them. Well, I better shut up for a minute, Peggy. You talk some.
Well, there's one thing I do want to tell you, and that is that you may be very happy now, and you think you almost have it made, got the world by the tail, but you haven't started to live until you know Baba's works. In your wildest imagination, you couldn't think that little you, little me, could have such a beautiful life, meet such beautiful people, and be treated as you will be treated. One of the first things that he used to tell us to do, and we've all read it when we were children in Sunday school, let your light so shine. Live the life that Baba wants you to live, and there is a reflection from you that other people will see. You'll have more doors open to you, more kindness, more help, till at times it will baffle you and you'll feel a little bit worried. Why me? Why all this attention to me? But it's only Baba returning to you what you're doing for him. You can't do more for him than he's going to do for you, because he'll always make it a little bit bigger. And repeat his name and keep it in your mind. Do the best you can, but it must be the best you can. And leave the results to him. The job might not turn out exactly to suit you, but 6 or 8 months later you'll see that's exactly what ought to have happened. And don't try to run the works. He knows better. Every time we put our foot in it and think, well, I think it's better this way, you're going to find out that you wish you had gone on the way the first thing came in your mind, which was put there by Baba. And there's no way of cheating with him. Be honest. If you're going to do a thing, all right, go ahead and do it. You might get a kick in the pants for doing it, but admit to Baba that you're sorry. And you'll learn to avoid the don'ts that we all have in life. You'll find very few don'ts if you follow Baba's discourses. For the simple reason, you recognize these don'ts before they really hit you. And you avoid many of them. There's a lot that we have to take, because that's karma. You have to work it off. But he will make it lighter. He will not relieve you of it. But if you have honest faith and love in your heart, and you ask him to lift it, he will help you. It's a hard road to get on. It's a hard one to stay on at the beginning. But it's the easiest road to travel after you master it. Your wildest imagination, you wouldn't think that life could treat you as well. You'll have your ups and downs, your illness and things like that, but they don't amount to everything. Because you learn to be in the world, but not of it. And I wish I could impress on all of you how you simply can't afford not to follow Baba. There's a little prayer he gave us, the prayer of repentance. If you say that, or you read it, and you break it down phrase by phrase, you will see all of the little things and all of the nasty things that we're all guilty of. until we learn this. And if you can follow that prayer, you have nothing to worry over as far as the steps that you're on, whether you're on the first rung or the second rung of the ladder. And try not to get off. It's a little harder to get back on than the first time. And I don't know if Andy would like to tell you a few of our experiences in our life with Baba, which we call our new life, because it is a new life. And I'll turn this over to him. Don't talk too long.
Just as an example, we had a young man call us up one evening and said, could you give us a couple hours tonight? We have a friend of mine's here with a problem and like to talk it over with you. So we were packing that night to go to Pittsburgh early the next morning. And I said, Chris, I can't possibly do it. It's late and all that, you know, but... Well, I got there 2 hours on the phone anyway, which was all right. But what had happened is Chris had met a young man in camp. They had just back from Vietnam. They had just come back, and this friend of Chris's he'd had it. I mean, he was fed up to hear. He wasn't going to do anything that he was asked to do. He was going to just sit, and whatever they wanted to do to him was fine. He was just fed up. He was finished. And Chris, his friend, a Baba lover, was concerned about this attitude of his and knew that it would cause him a great deal of trouble if he pursued it. But he couldn't get anywhere with Ken. So Ken got on the phone and told us that this was it. So it was his 21st birthday. And I'm not going to go into all the details. That was a 2-hour conversation. But I asked him how many years out of those 21 years had his parents been willing to sacrifice and, you know, all of the things that parents do out of love. And he knew it was a trap, so he didn't answer immediately, and so I answered it for him. I said, you're 21 years old, and your parents have given you 21 years. Up to date, you're right up to date, 21 years. So I said, do you think it would be a bad swap, a bad trade-off at all, if you gave them one? Give them this next year. For 1 to 21, that's good odds. So for some reason or other, that struck his sense of fair play. He went back to camp. They both came up to class 2 weeks later. They were living below Richmond, which is about almost, I guess, 200 miles from Washington. But Chris brought Ken up to class. Ken came to the door, and we had met him before, and a great big grin on his face. We met Ken. I said, well, how's it going, Ken? He said, just great. He said, everything that used to drive me up the wall doesn't bother me a bit anymore. And it was true. Just a change of attitude. Nothing, no big spiritual deal. Just a willingness to face facts and take his lumps and take it as it comes. Well, to make the story shorter, he got an early out. He got a 3-month early out so that he could go back to college in New Hampshire. And I think, Bob, you'll testify that if all of you could meet Ken today, you'd meet one of the happiest young men you've ever met. But here was, and please don't take it back out with you that we did anything to accomplish this. He knew what he should do. He was looking for somebody to tell him what he should do. He already knew it, but he just didn't want to make the decision. And that's the way it is in coming to Baba. Everybody knows they ought to do it. Come to God, give God their lives, surrender to God. But not quite ready to give up those few little goodies over in the corner. Well, I'll tell you, they're not worth much compared to Baba's love.
What did Baba tell you?
He told me to hold on to his Dhamman with both hands. He held his hands right out in front of my face like this and gripped his fingers till his knuckles were white, you know, like mine are now. And he just shook his hands in my face like this. And there he said, Baba says, hold on to Baba's diamond, no matter what happens. So, I started thinking right then, wow, what's going to happen to me, That's bad news. I've got to start looking around. I got to be on the alert, Well, I didn't get the point right away, see. I was thinking that I better watch out to see what was going to happen so I could grab on. Well, that's not the way it works, You grab on right now, and you hold on, so that when that something happens, you've got the thing. Baba tells the story about the child holding on to the mother's sari when they go to market together. And the mother doesn't worry about the child getting lost because she feels that tug. And the child doesn't worry about getting lost because it's hold of the mother's sari. So Baba says that's what you must do. You grab hold of my Dhamma, and then where I go, you go. He says the child can then begin to enjoy what's going on around the marketplace. The mother can shop. There's a good, firm relationship there. But you don't wait till something clobbers you to look for the Dhamma. You have to take it now with both hands and hold on tight, because as soon as you see something over here that looks pretty good, you let go with one hand. And then you get hold of it, whatever it is, and it seems like it's pretty good, so you might want to get hold of this with both hands, and then you let go. It's a very nice example. So in constantly remembering Baba, constantly thinking of him, whatever you do, you hold fast to his Dhamma. So when somebody jumps out and yells, boo, you don't panic. And then I found out that he might not have been talking about some big tragedy. I think he was more talking about every day. Just ordinary, everyday life, because that's where it is. Well, I think that's about all we should say. Oh, Peggy wants me to tell you the story about the movies, and if you have the time, I'll tell you that one. We went to Myrtle Beach, as I told you, and we went down to Brook Green Garden, which is a beautiful park, just fabulous. Great big oak trees with that southern moss, that moss hanging from the limbs like you see in the picture books. Beautiful lawns, flower beds, everything. And I thought, well, it'll be great to get away from the center with Baba, because at the center there was always bushes and straw hats in your way, and never could really get a good picture. And I said that I said to myself, this was a ego trip number, I don't know. I said, I'm going to get the best pictures of Baba, and they're really going to be something, because I could imagine him walking in his white sadra, and he was a beautiful man to watch walking. Well, we got down to Brook Green Gardens. We got there a little ahead of Baba's car, and was waiting at the top of a step, something like this. And I was standing up on the top of 3 or 4 long steps like this with my camera. I was taking a picture of Baba coming up to the steps, And I kept following his face, and he got closer and closer to me, and I was keeping right on his face. And he reached his hand out like this, right to the camera. And, well, if you ever see the movies, you'll see the smile. That's really, really something. You can't quite figure out what he means by it.
Mischievous.
Mischievous. That's it, Bobby.